A fly lands on your sandwich, and you probably react with annoyance and a lazy wave of the hand. You have refrigeration, sealed windows, plumbing, regular garbage collection, and a fair expectation that the insect has not just walked through an open latrine. A medieval household enjoyed none of those guarantees. The same fly might have crossed a manure heap, a butcher's stall, a diseased animal, or a corpse before arriving on the family's bread halfway through grace. Flies were far too ordinary to send every medieval person into panic whenever one buzzed across the table. People lived beside them, cursed them, struck at them, and carried on working. Anxiety sharpened when they appeared in swarms, covered food, entered wounds, tormented animals, or gathered around flesh beginning to decay. Ordinary experience, medical teaching, religious language, and urban law all connected flies with moments when the line between healthy life and corruption seemed dangerously weak. Medieval explanations often missed the biology while preserving a very real observation. For much of the Middle Ages, houses were open to the surrounding environment. Air and daylight entered through doors, shutters, roof vents, and windows that frequently lacked glass outside rich homes, castles, and monasteries. Fine insect screens were hardly standard household equipment. Kitchens opened toward yards. Animals might live beneath the same roof, inside an attached structure, or a few steps beyond the doorway. Manure fertilized fields. Scraps fed pigs. Slaughter yielded meat, hides, fat, bone, blood, and a remarkable quantity of material that nobody wanted lingering near dinner. The arrangement feels chaotic because modern homes conceal nearly every system supporting them. Clean water appears through a pipe. Waste leaves through another. Meat arrives chilled, trimmed, wrapped, and separated from the animal it once belonged to. Medieval households witnessed each stage directly. Flies witnessed it as well. Everyday language often grouped many small flying insects together. People could distinguish the one biting a horse from the gnat attacking their face without arranging either creature according to modern taxonomy. Medieval encyclopedias inherited older descriptions of tiny flies, stinging insects, animal pests, and creatures believed to emerge from moisture or decay. Their categories could become confused. Their direct observations were often much sharper. A housefly cannot bite a chunk from bread and chew it. It lands, tastes through its feet, releases fluid over solid food, and draws the softened material back into its body. Medieval diners knew nothing of that process. They could plainly see the insect moving from filth to food without acknowledging a single human boundary. It passed from stable to noble table without announcement, inspection, taxation, or the slightest respect for expensive silver. Keeping flies out was difficult because the materials attracting them were essential to daily life. Dung-enriched fields. Animals supplied traction, milk, meat, leather, and wool. Openings admitted air and light. Market sellers needed to display food. Butchers, brewers, cooks, fishmongers, bakers, and tanners worked constantly with organic materials. Closing every window and door through summer would have exchanged insects for darkness, smoke, oppressive heat, and foul air. Air, animals, food production, and useful waste all came with insects attached. Households defended themselves with whatever resources they possessed. Food could be salted, dried, smoked, cooked, placed in containers, stored inside cupboards, or covered with cloth. Smoke discouraged some insects, although adding more smoke to an already smoky room offered limited comfort. Servants might fan the table or brush flies away during a meal. Poor families owned fewer containers, had less storage space, and employed nobody whose designated responsibility was protecting the roast from six-legged intruders. The season changed everything. Flies receded during cold months across many parts of Europe and returned with warmer weather. Their rhythm was as familiar as winter fuel shortages, spring mud, and harvest labor. A handful of flies belonged to summer. A sudden cloud of them suggested that something nearby was feeding an unusually large number. At that point, irritation gave way to unease. A fly seemed to expose decay that might otherwise remain hidden. When a swarm appeared in a room, around an animal, above stored provisions, or beside a wound, the pressing question concerned whatever had begun to rot nearby. Medieval medicine treated that question seriously. Physicians drawing on Greek, Roman, Arabic, and Christian traditions explained health through bodily humors: air, water, diet, season, environment, and individual constitution. Putrefaction carried particular danger. Fumes rising from stagnant water, refuse, dung, or decomposing flesh could corrupt the air and leave the body vulnerable to sickness. Flies gathered wherever those conditions appeared. A physician could therefore read the insect as a warning, even without imagining it carrying an invisible organism. Flies marked places where heat, moisture, decay, odor, and disease came together. Medieval observers saw the same scene that would concern us. Their explanation connected its parts differently. A physician in 1348 had no microscope capable of revealing microbes on a fly's legs. He could still notice exposed food spoiling more quickly beside waste, intestinal illness increasing during hot weather, and a foul butcher's lane offering an unpleasant place to breathe. Corrupted air supplied the theory. Removing waste, covering provisions, separating dangerous activities, and improving ventilation could still produce practical benefits. The fear begins to make sense. Another question follows. Flies had always gathered around animals and waste, so why did they become especially troubling in certain medieval environments? Those environments were changing. Many European towns expanded between the High and Late Middle Ages. Markets grew larger, more animals passed through city gates for sale and slaughter, more residents shared wells, drains, streets, rivers, yards, and places of disposal. Butchers concentrated carcasses in offal. Tanners handled hides alongside urine, dung, and other powerful-smelling materials. Fish sellers worked with goods that became less appealing with every warm hour. Urban growth created trade, wealth, and specialized labor. It also packed thousands of excellent breeding places for flies into a small area. Towns enlarged the scale of an existing problem and turned it into politics. On a farm, manure might be moved farther from the house. A carcass could be buried, burned, fed to animals, or dragged beyond the working yard according to local practice. Space inside city walls cost money. A neighbor's refuse could become your smell, your blocked path, your polluted water, and your swarm of insects. Fly control now involved arguments over shared space, responsibility, and who would pay for removal. Municipal governments noticed. Ordinances from medieval England and elsewhere repeatedly addressed dead animals, slaughter remains, dung heaps, overflowing latrines, refuse in public places, and obstructed waterways. Officials were not directing a modern campaign against disease-carrying insects. They wanted passable streets, usable water, fewer offensive smells, and less putrefying material corrupting the surroundings. Enforcement remained inconsistent. Authorities repeated the rules because residents continued choosing whatever method cost the least and required the smallest walk, a municipal tradition with an impressive lifespan. Those regulations still matter. Medieval towns did not watch filth accumulate in complete indifference. Residents complained, and officials issued orders. Butchers could be assigned particular locations or told where their waste had to go. Decaying material offended neighbors, blocked streets, polluted water, smelled dreadful, and seemed medically dangerous. Flies belonged to that entire sensory experience even when the written rule targeted the refuse attracting them. The practical goal was controlled distance rather than total freedom from insects. Move the slaughtering area. Drag away the carcass. Unblock the drain. Cover the container. Take rubbish beyond the crowded lane. Keep dangerous material away from places where people slept, ate, worshipped, and bought food. Every measure required labor, which meant expense. Palaces, prosperous monasteries, and wealthy merchant households could maintain better storage and assign servants to remove waste. A crowded family living beside an urban workshop had little power to redesign its surroundings. One especially revealing object makes that inequality visible: the liturgical fan. Bread and wine remained exposed during portions of medieval church services, and insects showed no respect for sacred ritual. Church inventories record fans made from parchment, feathers, ivory, silver, and other materials. Some carried names directly associated with driving flies away. An early 13th century inventory from Salisbury Cathedral listed one silver fan and two made from parchment. Consider the workmanship devoted to a very practical message: keep that fly away from the chalice. Such an object does not show that every church possessed one or that ordinary families owned anything comparable. It proves that insects were treated as a contaminating presence even beside the altar. It also demonstrates how medieval objects could combine practical and sacred functions. A fan protected consecrated food and drink, added ceremony, displayed wealth, and could gather symbolic associations with angels or purity. All of those meanings occupied the same handle. Epidemic disease raised the emotional stakes even further. During and after the Black Death in the mid-14th century, towns across Europe developed or intensified measures involving isolation, burial, street cleaning, movement, animals, and the removal of decomposing material. Policies varied from city to city and changed across later outbreaks. Plague prevention operated within existing ideas about corrupted air, environment, contagion, divine judgment, and physical decay. Houseflies were not the main carriers of bubonic plague. Rodent fleas occupy the central position in the classic transmission model, while historians and scientists continue examining the importance of different vectors and forms of transmission in particular outbreaks. Medieval people possessed no accurate lineup of insects and their diseases. They saw bodies, rubbish, foul smells, warm weather, swarming creatures, and death arriving together. Flies became emotionally linked with catastrophe even when they were not producing that catastrophe through the mechanism people imagined. Modern research has partly justified the old disgust. Houseflies can mechanically transfer harmful microbes from feces and decomposing material onto food and surfaces. Under suitable conditions, they can contribute to the spread of intestinal disease. Every landing does not become an emergency, and flies cannot be blamed for every medieval epidemic. The instinct to protect food from them remained useful centuries before anyone understood microbes. Food was only part of the danger. An exposed wound created a far more disturbing encounter. Blowflies and related insects can deposit eggs on dead or damaged tissue. Larvae may then appear inside the wound, an infestation now described as myiasis in certain cases. For a medieval traveler, soldier, laborer, or animal keeper, their presence could show that an injury was deteriorating beyond control. The risk was common enough to be practical rather than theoretical. Medieval life produced ulcers, cuts, burns, bites, battlefield wounds, and occupational injuries in a world without antibiotics or sterile dressings. Depending on training, place, period, and availability, healers used wine, water, vinegar, honey, oil, herbs, and cloth to clean and cover wounds. Keeping insects away mattered. Uncontrolled larvae could damage healthy tissue, deepen an injury, or reveal dead flesh that had not been removed. The fly adds one complication. Certain larvae mainly consume dead tissue and can help clean carefully selected wounds. Modern medicine sometimes uses disinfected, laboratory-raised larvae under strict control. Medieval patients had no dependable maggot therapy. They could not reliably select species, sterilize the larvae, control their number, or prevent other insects from entering. A modern clinic offers organisms bred for medical use. A medieval ditch offered less reassuring quality control. Animals expanded the threat. Biting flies harassed horses and cattle. Larvae from other species could enter wounds or grow beneath an animal's skin. Owners needed no knowledge of the complete life cycle to notice livestock stamping, twitching, losing condition, injuring themselves, or becoming difficult to handle. A suffering horse represented unstable transport, labor, wealth, and sometimes military survival. A swarm surrounding one diseased animal could endanger the economy of an entire household. Christian teaching added another layer of meaning. Medieval audiences encountered flies through biblical accounts of the Egyptian plagues, images of corruption, and the name Beelzebub, commonly associated in medieval tradition with flies and demonic impurity. Preachers and commentators used persistent insects as images of sin, temptation, restless thoughts, and spiritual contamination. The imagery worked because everyone knew how flies behaved. They intruded, returned immediately after being driven away, gathered near decay, and spoiled precious things through brief contact. A preacher hardly needed to invent their symbolic power. An insect could provide a live demonstration during the sermon. A farmer did not see Satan every time a fly settled on the wall. Religious symbolism offered one way to interpret the insect in a particular setting. The same fly could be an ordinary breakfast nuisance and an image of corruption during worship an hour later. People understood context. Calling a dishonest person a snake has never required believing that person possesses scales. Natural philosophy strengthened the connection with decay. Many learned writers accepted versions of spontaneous generation, the belief that small creatures arose directly from decomposing material because their eggs and earliest stages remained hidden. Maggots seemed to emerge from meat. Flies consistently appeared around rot. Without controlled observation, the missing reproductive stages were easy to overlook. The reasoning formed a closed circle. Corruption produced flies. Flies identified corruption. Their appearance confirmed that matter had entered a dangerous condition. The explanation of reproduction was wrong, while the visible relationship remained so consistent that it appeared self-evident. Late medieval art reveals how flexible the fly's meaning could be. Painters and manuscript artists placed startlingly realistic insects on ledges, frames, pages, and devotional images. A fly might suggest decay, mortality, sin, or the physical world intruding upon sacred contemplation. It could also display the artist's skill by looking real enough to brush away. Petrus Christus painted one along the lower edge of his 1446 Portrait of a Carthusian. Scholars continue debating its precise meaning. That uncertainty is valuable. Medieval art never followed a universal code in which every painted fly carried one fixed definition. The insect might create illusion, suggest corruption, or perform both functions at once. Fear varied just as much as symbolism. A merchant household in a crowded Italian or Flemish city faced different insects, regulations, and storage problems from a farming family in northern England. Mediterranean warmth could lengthen the season of insect activity. Castle kitchens processing large amounts of meat created risks unlike those of a peasant family cooking one pot over the hearth. Stable workers, servants, cooks, nurses, butchers, washerwomen, and animal handlers encountered flies more directly than someone whose only involvement was complaining when one reached the table. Wealth changed the available response. Money purchased distance through separate kitchens, enclosed stores, stronger containers, cleaner chambers, servants, and quick waste removal. Complete control remained impossible. The silver church fan captures that limit almost perfectly. Elites could transform swatting a fly into ceremonial metalwork. The fly remained thoroughly unimpressed. Labor and gender shaped the daily defense. Much of it fell to people preparing food, cleaning rooms, preserving meat, nursing the sick, dressing wounds, tending children, milking animals, and caring for livestock. Household safety relied on repetitive instructions and actions rarely considered worthy of a chronicle. Cover the food, wash the vessel, move the scraps, examine the wound, empty the container, drive the fly away again. The work remains today. Appliances and public infrastructure have moved much of it out of sight. Were medieval people intensely afraid of flies? Reactions depended on the moment. Some situations produced real fear. Many encounters inspired irritation or disgust. Others belonged to the expected discomforts of summer. The insect became frightening when it crossed boundaries medieval communities worked constantly to maintain. fresh and spoiled, clean and filthy, sacred and ordinary, animal and human, healthy flesh and dying tissue. The fly carried a message whose meaning changed with the observer. A physician might see putrefaction and corrupted air. A cook saw uncovered provisions. A stable worker saw a suffering animal. A priest saw contamination near the altar or a useful image of spiritual decay. A city official saw another reason to remove refuse before complaints multiplied. A family beside a sickbed might see a body losing a battle that everyone could witness and nobody could completely explain. That response reached beyond superstition. It combined observation with medical and religious systems that lacked germ theory while paying close attention to environment and decay. A mistaken explanation could still lead to useful precautions. Remove rotting material, protect food, clean wounds, separate slaughter from living areas, improve ventilation, keep insects away from vulnerable bodies. Window screens, refrigeration, sealed containers, plumbing, organized waste collection, antibiotics, veterinary medicine, building rules, and insect control change the balance. Food stays cold. Rubbish leaves quickly. A window can close without turning the room into a dark chamber full of smoke. Flies feel like minor annoyances because an enormous network spends every day denying them access. The next time one lands on your sandwich, your reaction will remain surprisingly medieval. You will wave it away because the most important question concerns neither its size nor its location. It concerns where the fly has been. During a medieval summer, shutters stood open, horses waited in the yard, meat hung nearby, waste lay beyond the wall, and no screen separated the table from the street. That quiet buzzing carried the outside world straight into the house.